Hello, 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 and welcome to Emotional Support. I'm your host, Alessandra Torresani, and I am super excited to intro my next guest, Dr. Emily Anhalt. She is a clinical psychologist, keynote speaker, author, and co-founder of COA, the Gym for Mental Health. For the past 2 decades, Dr. Anhalt has worked clinically with executives, founders, and high performers and has conducted extensive research with prominent psychologists and entrepreneurs about how leaders can improve their emotional fitness. Dr. Anhalt has collaborated with companies like Google, Salesforce, NBC Universal, NASDAQ, and my personal favorite, the NBA. And her debut book, Flex Your Feelings, published with Penguin Random House, is available now. Be sure to pick up your copy and also listen to the previous episode from, I believe, season 2, where Emily came on and we talked all about COA, the Gym for Mental Health, which is fantastic. So be sure to give that one a listen. This is super special for me. For those who don't know, Emily and I have known each other since kindergarten, and that is when our love story began. So please enjoy our first real episode back of Emotional Support. Well, I have a very, very, very special guest with me. Um, she may be a doctor now, but when I knew her, when she was just a little baby, she was not a doctor. But I am going to introduce her as Dr. Emily Anhalt. You are a clinical psychologist and co-founder of the mental health startup COA, which is amazing. You've been on the podcast before, and you have a brand new book that was just released called Flex Your Feelings. And I just can't wait to dive in and talk all about this masterpiece. Truly, I it's funny. I just want to preface this of usually when people have books and they send me stuff and, the right thing to do for a podcast host would be like, oh, let me read it and like do my notes. Usually I'm like, oh, okay, like I'll skim through, I'll write a few notes. I was so invested in this book. I was every 2 seconds, I was like taking a screenshot of it, like a picture of it, of the page that I wanted to save, or I was writing down, but I didn't want to scribble too much because I was like, oh, I don't want it to be like a mess. But I also am so excited to send it to so many people who I know in the world right now need to work on their emotional fitness. So, Emily, welcome to Emotional Support. This is just so fun. Should we do like a little brief, like catch up of how we know each other?
Absolutely. And
You,
thank you so much. You're the sweetest. I always love talking to you.
my gosh. Well, Emily and I actually met. How old were we? 4? 4
Yeah,
years old?
kindergarten.
Kindergarten? Oh my gosh, which is so wild because now I have a preschooler. We met in kindergarten in the Bay Area, and we've known each other ever since we were little tykes. And just to see the growth that you've had as a human, and it's so funny because in reading this book, I don't think I made this up, but you talk about in the book how you were like, "Oh, I didn't know if I was gonna be a psychologist or something." Did you say that in the book, or did I make that up from another interview? Maybe it was another interview that I heard.
Yeah, I didn't really know I would do psychology until I got to like high school, college.
To high school, college. But I could have told you that you were gonna do it because you were like you were young and you were constantly, being the brains and the operation of the, I would say, the playground trying to, analyze everything and
That
help
is
everyone
so
out.
funny.
So
Gosh, well, you were such my performer inspiration. When I was
oh.
young, I became a dancer because I thought you were so cool and you were a dancer. And I think really you also showed me that it's okay to love performing.
Yes.
And I just really have that drive as well, and the way I've sort of satisfied it in my adult life is through public speaking, but I really remember going to my mom and saying, "Well, Alessandra just danced, not just gymnastics, and I wanna do that too," and we ended up on at the same dance studio, and, I just so appreciate you blazing that path.
My gosh, I love that. That dance studio, I think, means more to me and to so many people in this world than I think ever, which is shout out to Dance Attack in the Bay Area. They
Dance
were so
attack.
amazing. But I have just so many like core emotional, like
Yep.
mental wellness feelings towards there. I just actually, on a side note, restarted getting back into dance. And it truly is something that is so therapeutic
Mm.
where I can only imagine, you know, if you have that drive, like for a sport or something, and you get back and you do it again, it's just like, I don't know,
It's nice
there's,
to drop back in your body. It's so easy to be so
yes.
heady all the time. It's nice to have something to connect you back to your body.
Yes. Well, we don't really need an icebreaker, but this is something that I wanted to do because in your book, you talk about the importance of icebreakers when it comes to work or it comes to family affairs or whatnot. So the one that I chose is, what is your go to karaoke song?
Oh, that's such a good one. All right, so it depends on the vibe of the situation, but I
Okay.
generally go with California Love by Tupac.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is a surprise. And I am so into that right now.
Yeah, I know all the words anyway, so it makes it easy, and I think it does tend to surprise people, and I just also love California so much.
Listen, you're a big fan, but also that's a very hard song to do. I mean, the chorus is like, pretty groovy, but that's a good one. By the
What's
way,
yours?
oh my God, mine is always a go-to. It's always Shoot by Salt and Pepper. It's one of
Good
those
one.
things where, once again, when you
Look at
know the
us.
words, I mean, are we just two white girls like hanging out?
Yeah,
Um, it's like when you know the words. I also think that it's a generational thing. It's so funny. I just was at an event and Snoop Dogg was the private performer,
my
and I was
gosh.
looking around the room and like the dorkiest like white girls you've ever seen, like knew every single line of every single, and I was like, I think it was just a generation. Like we just like were like
90s hip
living
hop, you
90s
can't
hip
beat
hop.
it.
No, you
We
can't
were
beat it.
young, and actually they have studies that show that whatever music you listen to between the ages of 14 and 25, that is the music that you're going to think is the best music for the rest of your life.
Wow.
Because your brain is
Wow.
forming around all these emotions, you're figuring out who you are, music is helping you understand life during that really crucial time. And so 90s hip hop, that's what we were doing.
And that makes so much sense. The other one that's always in my head is Jay-Z and Pharrell, I'm a Hustler Baby, but that's not what it's
Nice.
called. I forgot. It's a different name, but you're right, because I remember being in 8th grade, being in the back seat of the car with my mom, and my best friend Jenna's mom was driving us around, and literally that song would be like on repeat. And you're right. It's when I hear those songs, I get so excited. When I hear Nelly, it's like literally, you're right. It's like the 8th
Totally.
grade trauma when you would go to the dances and everyone would be grinding up on each other and you're like, what is this? Like, you know,
100%.
they
Good
don't
old
have that. They
days.
don't make that anymore. But I love that you say in your book it's so important to have an icebreaker. So we did our little icebreaker, even though we didn't really need it. But I
I
wanted
love
to
it.
do that. So can you explain to me what is the 7 traits of emotional fitness for those who are listening?
Absolutely. So, we all know that working on our physical fitness is important, that the more physically fit we are, we eat well, we exercise, we get enough sleep, the better we're going to do in life. Life in
Yes.
general will be easier. We're less likely to get sick down the line. We're stronger. We can do more. And I wanted to help people understand what the emotional equivalent is because I think a lot of people wait until their mental health is really struggling to work on it. And
100%.
instead, we could work on it proactively, like we take ourselves to the gym. So I wanted to figure out, what does that look like? What is an emotional push up? How do we do them? And so I did a big research study where I interviewed 100 psychologists and entrepreneurs about what makes someone emotionally healthy. Like, how can you flex your feelings, essentially? And out of this research came these 7 traits of emotional fitness, the 7 things that emotionally healthy people are working on all the time. And those 7 things are mindfulness, curiosity, self awareness, resilience, empathy, communication, and playfulness. And my goal with this book was to give people a manual of how to get stronger in those 7 areas of their life.
I think that the one that resonated for me the most was the mindfulness over meditation,
Mm.
because I'm someone that I got into transcendental meditation, and I was really into it, because the reason why, and I always push transcendental meditation on people if they're like, I don't meditate, I don't know, I can't sit there in my thoughts, I can't, hear the, I go, this one allows you to have the thoughts come in and out in the background. It's perfect for artists or performers or, you know, high strung people like myself, who have the thoughts constantly going through their head. And something that I found is I was really good halfway into my pregnancy with my meditation. Then I started falling off because I would be uncomfortable and in pain and I couldn't really sit too long. And then once you have a baby, it's like that all kind of goes out the door. And so this was kind of a reminder to me of you say you can tolerate more than you think. And I think that that was such a powerful saying because you're right. Even if it's just 2 minutes a day, just closing your eyes for 2 minutes can change everything. Like it can really just let you sit in your thoughts and let them pass by, like let them just keep going. So I love that that was your number one. Was that your number one or was that the number one with the study that you found?
So, mindfulness, which I define as becoming more comfortable being uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
obviously meditation is a good way to deal with discomfort because it's uncomfortable to sit with our thoughts. I put that one first because every other trait is going to require you to be a little uncomfortable. So, just like if you went to the gym and you were to say, "All right, I'll work out, but only until I feel any physical discomfort, then I'm going to stop." You're never going to get stronger or
No.
faster, right? And so, similarly with your emotional fitness, if you're not willing to be a little emotionally uncomfortable, you're not going to grow emotionally. Like, literally, every single thing you want in life lives on the other side of discomfort. So, the better you are at tolerating that discomfort, the more options open to you in life. So, it's almost like stretching before you work out. You have to get ready for the rest of it.
Well, it was so funny. I had just finished the book and I went to this gala this past weekend for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it was really fun. We talked all about your book. It was really exciting.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing.
and they said to me, they go, "Oh, do you want to walk the red carpet?" And I can't even tell you and I know I'm not alone in this because I've talked to many more famous people where it's the most uncomfortable situation in the world
Mm,
because that probably 80% of the people who are walking, are nobodies. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's like, you're like, oh, well, I shouldn't have to be doing this. Like they know who I am, these camera people. And then they don't, and they ask your name and they ask how to spell it. And you just feel like so embarrassed. You feel just like, it's just it's nerve-wracking and you're like, "Oh my gosh, is something in my teeth? Like, is something on my butt? Like, am I gonna fall?" And every single person that you talk to goes through the same thing. So I was like, "Okay, this is me being in a discomfort like area. I'm going to step into this discomfort and be like, you know what? I'm going to be happy later on. I'm going to do this interview. I want to talk about the podcast, and this is the only way that it's going to happen for this interview right now. So I have to do it. So let's do it. Let's pretend to be someone else." And honestly, I always pretend to be like a different persona because I have to step outside of my own insecurities because it's the only
mm.
way to do it. And so I don't know if that's healthy, but it is a way for me to kind of be able to accomplish something in that discomfort and be like, "Okay, well, I'm just playing a part right now, and that's okay."
Mm. And sometimes we have to fake it till we make it. And I do think the more we lean toward our discomfort instead of away from it, the easier it becomes to do those things. So
Yeah.
I think what you gave was an example of one small way that you are leaning toward your discomfort instead of avoiding it by not doing the event. And that is the whole point of the book is how can we find these places in our life where normally we're trying to avoid discomfort and thus we're shutting down all of these possibilities for ourselves. How instead could we say, all right, I know that this makes me a little uncomfortable. Like I know it's hard to have this tough conversation. I know it's hard to have a boundary. I know that it's difficult to speak about myself at a party. Whatever your discomfort is, do it a little bit instead of not doing it and show yourself, oh, I'm capable of this. And it will allow you to do other things you might not have realized were possible.
I think another great example for people is, you work with so many high profile people, and I don't mean that as like, oh, celebrities. I mean like high profile who are literally creating the apps, who are literally creating technology of the future, and they are just have such stress. And I see that as someone who's, my husband is in, technology. My dad was in technology. My mom was in technology. I understand that brain. Like it's a very different brain and it's high functioning, And what is something that you would say to someone, whatever, whomever they may be, even if it's someone who's listening right now, like the first step to your emotional fitness with the mindfulness? If someone's like, I don't have time for this. I'm someone that's running, a Fortune 500 company and I can't do X, Y, and Z. Or someone that's like, hey, I'm working at McDonald's and I'm a single mom and I have 3 kids that I'm trying to raise. Like, how can I put that priority first? What would you say to someone from any end of the spectrum?
I mean, you're speaking to such a common concern, which is, yeah, this is all well and good, but I don't really have time. And the truth is that our time shrinks and expands in relation to our priorities.
Hmm.
We make time for the important things. And what people don't realize is that an investment in your emotional fitness will actually free up a lot of time for you later. What we don't realize is the emotions that we don't confront, the things we don't let ourselves feel, the discomfort we don't let ourselves embrace, it ends up being present in this sort of difficult, distracting way all the time. And if instead we put a little time into working on things now, it means that we won't be carrying around these tough emotions with us all the time. So it actually is this incredible investment. And then for those people who are like, well, but I'm doing fine, think about like a world class athlete. I'm sure that athletically they're doing well, but if they
Great.
want to be incredible, they're
Yeah.
going to need a coach. They're going to need to focus on their fitness. They're going to need to work at it every single day. And for those of us who are using our minds as our greatest asset, we should be investing in that asset by working on our emotional fitness in an ongoing way.
And I think what's really cool about this book and about what you're trying to do of teaching everyone is that you can do this yourself. It doesn't you don't need 30 people and all this money to be spent. You can really focus on yourself and really just jotting down your notes and your thoughts and your feelings really is such a game changer, and I can't recommend that enough. Like, that's how I get all my podcast ideas. That's how I get literally every idea. And it's just expressing in a different way, writing it down. It's fabulous. But I think that's what you're doing is you're helping so many people from a wide range that you can do this yourself and you're strong enough to do it yourself. And I think we're
Mm.
not reminded of that. Like, we're told we need so many things in our life at all times, but really we need ourselves for our mind, and that's okay.
For sure. And I think we also forget as adults that if you practice something, you'll get better at it. We kind
Yeah,
of, we know that as kids because we're learning
sure.
everything. In adulthood, we've sort of settled into doing the things we're already pretty good at. And you forget if you start something new, you will get better at it. And that
Sure.
is what I have found with this work is a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm just not empathetic or I'm just not resilient. I'm just not a good communicator. And the whole goal with this book is to show you you can improve in those things. You just have to practice. You do your emotional push ups every day. You will become more empathetic, a better communicator, more self aware, and that will also make all kinds of other incredible things happen in your life.
Something that I loved that I wrote down was one of the steps was about curiosity. And I thought that was so funny. I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder why that's a step, Because to me, I was like, I'm such a curious person. I always ask questions. And I now find myself to be even more of a curious person because I have a toddler that is the most curious, Miss Nosy. I call her Nosy Posy because she literally asks every question. She wants to know how everything works. She has a mind that's like she wants to know the process. She wants to know the step by step of how we're going to accomplish something. And she's so curious to learn. So I've found myself even more so being like that. But I love that that was one of the steps on how to gain curiosity. Why was that so important as being a step?
So, when I talk about curiosity, I talk about it in the sense of what you were talking about asking questions, having a growth mindset, wanting to learn. But I also talk about it as not being too defensive against
Right.
the information that will help you grow as a person. So to me, curiosity is almost the opposite of defensiveness because when we're defensive, we're sort of working hard to keep difficult truths out. And when we're curious, we're actually asking for information to come in so that we can learn from it and grow. And the reason curiosity comes before self awareness is that when we lower our defensiveness, then we become more aware of the things that we've been hiding from ourselves. So, curiosity comes first because you have to be willing to ask questions. What am I not seeing? What could I learn about myself? And then as you open yourself up to that, then you're going to learn, oh, wow, I have these patterns I didn't realize I was repeating. I am drawn toward this particular type of person over and over, even though they're not good for me. Or, I'm being perceived in this particular way by a lot of people and I don't even realize that I'm doing it. The only way to know those things is to be willing to get curious.
And I think that it's a good skill as someone who is in a marriage where it's very tough when you have a kid. Things are really tough, especially the first year. I don't think enough people told me that, and it was kind of a shock to me. But I think it's good to be curious to ask the questions of like, what could I be doing to improve X, Y, and Z? Or why is it that, the closing, like not closing a cupboard, why is that something that's triggering me so much to the point where it literally will make me go, should I get a divorce over this? You know what I mean? Like it's so silly. Like I laugh about it now, but in the moment, it is so serious and it is so real for me. And it's so deep where that I have to step back and I want to take that time and go, okay, well, I'm so curious. Why are these things affecting me? Or what can I do to maybe improve, our relationship or our communication or my anxiety. I had shared with you earlier that I was very anxious because this was, the first time my husband was taking our daughter, to a class without me. A, he works, during the day, but B, I'm such a control freak of like, oh my gosh, what if, God forbid something were to happen if I wasn't there, like I would never be able to live with myself. And I have to kind of learn to let go and be at peace, and be like, okay, you know what? I need to find out, be curious of why these certain things are happening in my life. So I think the curiosity thing is great for every aspect of every kind of person and any situation that you're going through, whether it's the work, the way that you use it as an example, if you're a colleague that you're curious about or about your work habits, or as someone who has the partnership at home. I think that that's really, really unique and special.
Yeah, it's really hard to change something before you know it exists. So
Yeah.
curiosity helps us see, oh, there are these things happening that maybe that's not exactly how I want to move forward with my life. Maybe I want to shift that. And, we're so good at hiding things from ourselves. There's so much
Yes.
you don't know. And until you make a real intentional practice of getting curious, it will be difficult to know those things and a lot of information will fly right over your head and past you.
Well, and the curiosity goes right into the self-awareness, right? I mean, I think that
Exactly.
that's perfect why it's like 2 and 3 of like knowing thyself, you say, of who do you think you are? How self-aware are you? I mean, I personally would say I feel like I know who I am, but then after having a baby, I had no idea who the fuck I
Mm,
was. Like
mm.
that became a totally different person, and I'm still trying to identify who I am and figure
Mm.
it out. And I'm like, it's been 3 years. Like, this is crazy. I
Well,
should
it's a
know by now.
moving target,
But
like there's
yeah,
always more to get to know about ourselves.
yeah. What would you say would be the best tool for someone to get to know themselves? If someone is just, and I wouldn't even say it's an insecure person, but someone that maybe has never even thought like I should know who I am. I should be self-aware of things, because trust me, I see so many people who are not self-aware of them themselves, and they make things very uncomfortable. What would you say to someone who maybe has no idea where to even take the first step with
Mm.
that?
Well, so the first step might just be understanding that there are things you don't know about yourself. The research shows that 95% of people would rate themselves as very self aware, but only 10 to 15% of people actually are self aware.
Shit, then I
And
guess I don't
that's,
know who I am.
I mean, most of us don't, right? I mean, the whole thing is you don't know what you don't know. You
Yeah.
know everything you do know about yourself, and that's a lot. So it feels
Yes.
like it's everything, but there are all kinds of things that we all don't know. So the first step is just saying, okay, there are probably things to learn about myself, even though I feel like I know a lot. And then, in order to build your self awareness, I kind of give three big suggestions. The first one is therapy. Therapy is this incredible place to get to know yourself. You don't have to be in crisis or broken or really struggling to benefit from therapy. It's a great place to learn about who you are. So that's one. The second one is journaling. You spoke about this before. When
Yeah.
we write things down, it creates a little space between our thoughts and our actions, and we can start to understand how we feel a little better. And then the third suggestion I give is that you should be asking for feedback from people in your life regularly. And one of the emotional push ups I suggest is send a text message to a few people in your life every once in a while that says, hey, what's one thing I'm doing really well as a friend or a sister or a mom, a colleague or a boss or whatever it may be? And what's one thing I could do 10% better?
Hmm.
And pay attention to the feedback that comes back because you might be really surprised by what people say. And it's a great way to learn about who you are as other people see you.
Now, if I had gotten that text from you, I would be so nervous of like what to respond. Like if I write something and like she hates me, like, so I feel like do it with a comfortable friend or a comfortable family member to start with, because I think that that would be the best way. But I think that's really cool because you mentioned something about your best friend and how it was something about, now I'm blanking because this is my mom brain going on, where it was, I can't remember in the book, you talk about whether you like had to cancel a plan or something.
Right,
Was
right,
that what it
right.
was? And
Yes.
and your friend responded and was like, I don't like how you just at last minute cancel plans. Was
So it was
that
the opposite.
it
So
was the
I'm the
opposite?
kind of
Okay.
person who
We got there.
really
We got
doesn't
there.
like to cancel, right?
Yeah.
And she is an introvert and is super down to have
To
plans
cancel.
be canceled.
Correct.
In fact, she's thrilled. It just gives her time to herself. And we had to learn how to kind of speak in each other's language of, I know that you don't feel the same way I do, but I know you have other situations that make you feel this way. So, that kind of leads into the empathy and communication aspect of it all.
But I love that because it was so honest and it was so beautiful. And I felt in that moment like what a closer bond maybe you guys even
Mm.
got. Because my best friend, she knows everything about me. I feel like sometimes she's my therapist and that's not a great thing. And I don't want to push that on her. But being able to communicate like that and on a deeper level, I was like, oh, I'm gonna write her and ask her that question because
Oh,
I
that's
think that was
amazing.
it was really cool because I'm sure there are many things that I could improve on, and not that we are scared to like share with each other, but it would be something like, I wouldn't think to even ask that to her,
And
or
people usually aren't going to tell you what they think unless you ask.
no.
And I like the phrasing, what could I do 10% better? Because it feels like, we could all improve a little bit. You're not saying, what am I terrible at? You're saying, what could I do just to level up a little bit? So
Yeah.
did you end up sending her that
No,
message?
I'm going to. I'm
Oh,
going
great.
to because I just finished it and I was like, oh, okay, that's a really good idea. Like, I like that. It's a safe space. So I know she probably might write back and be like, did someone steal your phone? Like, what the fuck is going on? But also at the same time, she'll probably listen to this episode and be like, okay, I'm expecting that text message. Like, I know this is happening,
I love it.
Something I absolutely love that you talk about in the book too is how you should name your feelings,
Mm.
because this is something I'm currently going through with Lady, in my daughter, is that I teach her to name her feelings. When she's crying or she's feeling sad, we talk about why you're sad, why you're frustrated. She doesn't quite know how to say frustrated yet. So she'll be like, I'm strated, And I was like, I know what you are because you're making the furrowed brow and you're like, so like, oh, you don't know. But it's so important for us, even as adults, to be
Mm.
able to name our feelings, because there are so many feelings and there are so many emotions, and things can get confused and things can get, twisted around. And it really, if you name them and you give them an identity, it also helps you to release it if it
Mm.
is something that's very emotional. How should we name our feelings? Let's do an example. Can you help me out here?
Sure. So I think a lot of us just weren't taught how to name our feelings. What you're doing for your daughter, I think that's something our generation has leaned into in a new way.
Yeah,
I don't know that a lot of our parents were saying, I think what you're feeling right now is angry, And so if you don't have a word for something, it's a lot harder to have you to feel understood and
sure,
seen and to know what to do about it. So
sure.
one of the things that I recommend people do is Google feelings wheel. When you
Cool.
type feelings wheel into Google, oh, you'll get all these pictures of a wheel that has all these different feelings because we're all pretty good at naming happy, sad,
Yes.
angry, but there are so many micro feelings within that. When you're happy, you might be grateful or excited or proud and so to really find that nuance is super helpful. So just learning the vocabulary of what you feel. And then
So helpful.
the next time a person just is feeling overwhelmed, taking 1 second and saying, what is it that I am actually feeling in this moment?
Mm,
Where am I feeling it in my body? And how would I describe this emotion? It can really turn the alarm bells in your brain off because a feeling is trying to alert us to something. And when we listen to it, it will often stop feeling like such an emergency and we can work with those emotions instead of against
sure.
them.
No, I absolutely love that. So the feelings wheel. So that is everyone's homework right now. Take a pause on this episode, start Googling the feelings wheel, and you're going to see everything. And something that I have found as a mom, that I've had to learn, something that I didn't really have before, or maybe I did in a way, but I really had to learn resilience.
Mm.
Um, you talk about it in the importance of grief. I, knock on wood, haven't had to deal with, a grief other than, my grandparents who were like my best friends, but I mean, I'm talking like a real, real, real grief that, a lot of people have tragically dealt with. And maybe that's not fair for me to say I haven't dealt with the grief. Maybe I have, and that's why I'm like compartmentalizing it. Um, but I think about being resilient is so important. I guess I'm resilient when it came to auditions and stuff like that. But really, I found the most resilience was I had to be a mom, and whether I was feeling anxiety ridden with postpartum anxiety, or I just figured out, oh, I had a severe like OCD, postpartum OCD, and I didn't realize I had because I thought that meant with just my number OCD. No, it was like the obsessive thoughts that I had
Mm.
over and over. And I really had to learn to be resilient for my daughter, and for myself. So I didn't spiral down the rabbit hole, which was a very easy thing for me to do. So, for those who are looking to find resilience and learning how they can do that, not a quick fix, but what would be the first step to finding resilience, especially when it has to do with grief?
Right. So my resilience chapter is so much about grief because I don't know that we're taught very well how to grieve throughout our
Not at
life.
all.
And I think there is this idea that you're only allowed to grieve when you lose someone really important to you. But really, I think we should be grieving anytime we lose anything that's important to us. So if you went to an audition and you didn't get it and you felt like you had to just charge right forward into your day, then you're going to carry some emotion with you that might not be helpful all the time. And I think if instead you said, you know what, I'm going to take 10 minutes and feel really bummed that I didn't get that because I was excited about it and it didn't happen. So I'm just going to let myself feel sad. I'm going to throw on a sad song. I'm going to feel sad about it. Then when you move forward from that, it will be in a much more authentic way. And so I want people to feel like they can create these spaces for themselves where they're letting themselves feel what they feel as they go through difficult things. And then for a little emotional push up for resilience, I recommend that people make sort of a resources menu where you write down what are all your internal resources, what are all your external resources. So when you're going through a hard time, what are all the things you could lean on to get through that hard time? And internal resources are things like I've been through hard things before, so I have confidence in my ability to do that. External resources might be okay, I have these three friends I can call, and I have this community that I can write to online. And write all of these resources down now when everything's mostly fine, so that when you are going through a hard time, you already know everything you can lean on to help you get through
Sure.
it.
Sure. I absolutely love that. Yeah, I feel like being able to take that moment to actually feel your feelings, as I always say, feel your feels. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't think, not getting the audition would affect me, but it does, because it's about the buildup, right? It's about over and over and over,
Right,
and
exactly.
then it's the big emotional rush of it going away. Yeah, it's tough. Grief is an emotional roller coaster, and even if it's just a little grief, it can build, like you
Mm,
said, to be something that's harder. And look, I'm a firm believer in the reason why I just want to talk about the book being so amazing is I'm a firm believer in you have to work on your emotions, because I truly and someone the mind and gut connection is so
mm,
important, and it is proven, it's connected. And I think that we get ourselves physically sick
mm.
when we're not emotionally well.
Yeah.
And you're right. Just because you're like, oh, I'm doing great, I'm doing awesome, doesn't mean you can't keep working on that. Um, and I think we are a generation, being, 38, and you too, like our generation, I think, can do so much to help the younger generation, on identifying things, feeling your feels and naming your emotions. You talk about empathy, a lot, and the difference between empathy and sympathy, which I thought was really cool. Sympathy is learned, right? And empathy is just, you just have it if you have it, right? Isn't that kind of what how
I'd say it a little different. To me, the
you
difference
say it
is
your yes,
uh,
please.
empathy to me is when you actually let yourself feel what someone else is feeling. Like sympathy is like, all right, I intellectually understand you're going through a hard thing and I feel bad for you. Like think,
It makes
it's
sense.
almost like
Yeah.
pity or sadness for you.
Sure.
But empathy is like, oh, I'm feeling what you're feeling. You're going through a hard time and I feel that in my body. I am with you in this actual moment. And so a lot of people don't want to empathize because we don't always want to feel what other people are feeling. And the reason self awareness comes before empathy is if you're not comfortable feeling your own feelings, you're not going to want to feel other people's feelings. So a lot of people who aren't very empathetic, it's because they don't even want to feel their own feelings.
Yeah.
So the more we get comfortable with our own emotions, the more we'll be able to really empathize with others.
So here's my psychology question to you, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I have people stop me on the street all the time and they'll come up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, your daughter's so empathetic. She's so sweet." She'll just go if a kid is crying in the park, she'll go right up to them and she'll grab their back and it's okay to cry. It's
Oh,
okay. It's
that's so
bizarre.
sweet.
No, it's I wish I wonder if I have it on video and I'll send it to you, but she'll do that in dance, like, or she'll always be the one that like waits for the kid who's crying before they get in class. And it's like, it's okay, you come with me, I'll take care of you. And I'm just like, it's bizarre, like you're 2.5, what's going on, kind of a thing. Well, now 3, but it's strange because I think that I've done a really good job as a parent and my husband and my mom being a grandma and, the support system that she has, of the naming your feelings, being self-aware, knowing that I'm creating a trusted environment for her. But I wonder, do you think that empathy is something that is learned or something that's just inherited, like when we're kids
Mm.
and, we forget about it as we get older?
So, something I say a lot about the whole kind of nature versus nurture thing
Yeah.
is nature loads the gun, but nurture pulls the trigger.
Hmm.
And by that, I mean, I do think we're born with certain predispositions. I think
Sure.
some people's mind is just wired a little differently to be more able to feel certain things. But I also think the environment we're in teaches us what behavior is acceptable and, how to show up. And so it's a both and thing. And at the same time, I want to make sure people understand that even though you might be more predisposed to be empathetic versus not, it can still be learned. It's like
Yeah.
someone saying, I'm just not athletic. It's like, okay, so you might not be a celebrity athlete, but that doesn't
Sure.
mean you can't work on your athletics and get
Sure.
stronger. The same is true with something like empathy. And then on the other side, I have people tell me, well, I'm too empathetic. I'm constantly giving to other people and I'm nurturing and I end up not taking care of myself. And what I usually say to that is, I don't know if the problem is that you're too empathetic. I think the problem is just that you don't have strong enough boundaries. And
Wow.
boundaries are what let us be empathetic in a sustainable way. And
I
we
love
should all
that.
be working on having strong boundaries in our life.
How can I, personal question, how can I teach my child what boundaries are? I think that's something I'm having a really hard time with because like I said, she is so, empathetic and she always is she's a very touchy-feely person. She wants to hold every kid's hand, she wants to give hugs, and kids will literally push her off
Mm,
them, and she doesn't quite understand, and I'll say to her, "You know what? Today they just don't wanna be touched, and that's okay, maybe tomorrow you can ask them to hold their hand, and if they say no, you say, 'Okay, I understand we need space,' but, what is something that how do you teach boundaries? Like, or if you were never taught it as a kid, how do you create those boundaries now as an adult?
Well, sounds like you're doing such a great job already, just helping her understand that really boundaries are just each of our best way to deal with the fact that we only get to control ourselves. Boundaries are about the fact that I don't ultimately get to choose what you do, but I do get to choose what I allow for myself and what actions I take in response. And so I think there's something really beautiful about saying, wow, that kid, wanted you to understand what is and isn't okay with them. That's nice that they made that clear, and you get to decide what is and is not okay with you. And that, isn't it great that we all get to choose what happens to our bodies and what we do and don't like? So it feels like it's coming intuitively to you, but it's complicated because not all of us were taught about boundaries. And some of us had our boundaries
No.
overstepped and we didn't necessarily know how to enforce them.
No, and I was very lucky to be, I think, very confident in who I am and a loudmouth and being like, "No, you can't do this," but I worry because I see, I wanna make sure that I'm teaching her how to be strong without being, too standoffish and then too touchy-feely, it's this
Parenting is
odd.
hard.
It's bizarre. It's fucking bizarre.
It's
It's
hard.
just it's bizarre. Well, I wanna move on to something that you talk about because this was something that I not necessarily need help with, but I feel like this is a good one. When you talk about communication to conflict,
Mm.
can you talk a little bit about that, the strength of why communication is so important?
For sure. So I think maybe in similar ways that we weren't all taught boundaries, I don't think we were all taught how to have healthy conflict. If your parents didn't have conflict in a way that felt reparative and helpful, and, or if they hid it from you, but you knew things were wrong, or if they had really intense conflict and it was overwhelming, a lot of us just didn't learn how to do it in a healthy way. And thus a lot of people avoid conflict. And something I talk about in the book is that conflict to a relationship is like exercise to a muscle. Meaning, when we exercise our muscle, we're actually damaging the muscle a little bit. But when we repair, when we rest and eat protein and drink water and sleep, the muscle grows back stronger than it was before. And that's how relationships are. When you have healthy conflict in a relationship, your relationship will be stronger than if you had no conflict. And so the key is to learn how to fight fair in a healthy way and how to repair afterwards. And so to do this, I think people first have to understand, what is my relationship to conflict? Does it make me anxious? Do I avoid it? Do I get too intense and overwhelmed? How can I step toward that repair part?
Mm,
How can I circle back after the fact and say, all right, let's talk about how that all went. How could we show up better for each other next time? How did it feel to talk about things in that way? And as you do that, you will notice, think about the last relationship where you went through a really hard thing and you got through it together and you feel even closer than you did
yeah,
before.
yeah.
Well, this is happening all the time. Anytime you feel let down by your partner, or anytime a friend makes you upset, you have this opportunity to actually strengthen the relationship by repairing the conflict.
Right, right. Which I think is so important. I mean, let me tell you, there's conflict all the time in our household. And I find myself going from 0 to 100 faster than I usually would, but especially I would say the first year after having a baby, because everything is just so high. Everything is just high stakes. And so
Totally.
I can imagine if you are having financial issues, if you are, having job issues, if you are, running a business and you're in control of all these people. These are all high stakes situations, being a
Yeah.
mom, being a dad, like being a parent, like is high stakes. And sometimes the littlest thing, like we were laughing earlier about the cupboard, like that can make me go from 0 to 100 and trying to figure out how to be able to communicate and hash it out without it being that's it. You know what I mean? Then that's it in the relationship, or that's it in the work. And it's a learning process. I feel like
It is.
it's never fully complete, but I love that you talked about that, because it's something that I find myself trying not to be like, we all have our parent issues, and we're all, some are children of divorce and whatnot. And so you don't want to mimic what that relationship was, but you want to learn from that and move forward. And I think it's tough.
It's
It's
tough.
tough
There's no
communicating.
manual. We're
There's
not
no
taught in
manual.
school.
No.
And so in the book, I try to give a few communication tools that you can add to your
Yeah.
toolbox, that kind of thing. And again, it's a thing you can practice. You and your partner can say, all right, we don't, not you necessarily, but someone out
No,
there,
but
they
yeah,
could
but
say,
yes,
we
I think
don't
it's
fight
great.
fair. We don't fight well. I feel like when we have conflict, it ends up making things feel worse. I want to change that. Let's practice better, like getting better at
Yep.
fighting.
Yeah.
And you can get better at it. Communication can be learned and practiced. So that's like, more than anything, I just want to empower people to realize you can strengthen these things in your life just by practicing them and, adding a few tools to the mix.
I love also when you say that play is so important, because you think back of, it's so funny because your book, everything that it says, it's like for me, I'm like, oh, I'm going through all of these steps because I'm going through it with my child, of like
Yeah.
seeing how and you forget it's bringing back that child, like, vulnerability and curiosity to your mind, but the importance of play, the importance of play in the workplace. And I know everyone's like, play, like sexual play, like sounds weird, you know what I mean? But you're like, no, play, like literally playing, having a good time, laughing. I think the best times that we've ever had on sets, when we didn't know people, like when we would sit down, we would do read throughs and stuff. And then you're like, what do you do? They would find activities for us to bond, whether it be like an escape room, or I'm trying to think some of the other things we did. We went whale watching one time, like stuff like that is like, it's so fun, and it creates a bonding experience, and it brings a lightheartedness to to the workplace, to your home environment. I think it's just wonderful.
Yeah, play's so important. And as adults, we forget how important it is. But,
Yeah.
play creates all kinds of opportunities for creativity and spontaneity and collaboration. I read a study that showed that people who play regularly live longer by a significant number of years than people who don't play regularly.
Wow.
That's how important play is for our life. And
Oh my
we should be
gosh.
weaving it into our lives every day?
No, I'm telling you, like, just doing something silly, and, people laugh at me all the time because I feel like I'm always at Disneyland. Honestly, when I'm having an emotional day, it's easy for me just to get in the car, take her to Disneyland, and just have some fun. And there's like that boost of serotonin that like just makes me like feel like, okay, you know what, I'm having a good time. Like this is good. Like I needed
Yeah.
this for my mental health and for myself. So
Yes.
I'm gonna say it's because I needed some play.
We need
Um,
play. Good for
we
you for
need
getting it.
we need play. Another thing you talk about is finding the gray, and that's
Mm,
something that's very tough for me. I live my life very black and white, and I know things are not black and white. And my partner's very gray. Everyone around me is very gray, except for my mom and I. My mom and I. That's why we work because we're very black and white. It's like it's either is going to happen or it's not going to happen. Um, how would you say for me, for example? I won't use other people, but for me, like what would be a good way for me to kind of step out of that moment and say, okay, how can I find the gray in this situation?
Part of it is this sort of emotional journey of accepting that nothing actually is black or white. That's not actually how life
I know.
works. And so when we try to make it black and white, we're trying to create a different reality that's not really true. So part
Yeah.
of it is
Yeah.
that. And then again, there's a practice to it, which is how can I step just a little bit toward the gray in something? So I can be really black and white with my thinking too. One of the things I'm super that way with is keeping my apartment clean. My apartment is either the cleanest, most organized thing you've ever seen, or it's an absolute mess. And so I've challenged myself, rather than waiting till things are really bad and then doing a huge clean, what if I just do a mini clean every once in a while?
Sure.
And it doesn't feel as satisfying to me because it doesn't have that black or white
Yes.
vibe.
Yes.
But it has taught me, oh, having it be a little cleaner is better. And sitting in that discomfort, back to the mindfulness, is
Right.
good for me. So we all have to figure out in what parts of our life are we extreme in our thinking and how can we take just a few steps toward the middle?
I love that. And it could be as simple as just cleaning. But you're right. I know that feeling where it's literally, I'll clean one room and everything else is dirty. And I'm like, oh, this is a mess. This is awful. Like, I don't feel, and then the satisfaction of when everything is like perfectly organized. You're like, yes, this feels
Totally.
so good. So yes, I do understand that. But yeah, it is about finding the gray in everything. And that's
Hmm.
something that's really tough, I think, for my mom and I. It's just how I think our minds are, and realizing that it's not like that. It's a really tough thing. I think it's the Virgo in her, and I don't know what it is in me. It's maybe the Gemini. I don't know. We'll say that.
Yeah, I get it though. It is really hard. Life would be so much simpler if that's how it was, if everything was
Yeah.
just yes, no, on, off, black, white. But it's just not that way. And so we do ourselves a big service by getting comfortable, starting to practice that more gray minded thinking.
Well, I am going to do that. Something I recommend everyone do is finding their community. That was
Mm,
another thing you talk about. I have been very, very, very lucky to find an incredible community in mental health and in mental wellness. And just by me opening up and sharing my story of bipolar disorder, that's not for everyone to share. But, if you feel comfortable doing it, it's a great, easy way actually to find a community. And I found a community of moms that I had that still I'm so close with, and I can't imagine not having them in my life.
mm,
And I think that after COVID and during COVID, the world was a very lonely place, and it still feels like a very lonely place. And I think that there's such importance of finding community, whether it be in something that you love as a hobby, or your mental well-being, something that you can bond on with, something that you have in common with someone else, or finding the community in work. I think that it's so important. What would be your step to, if someone is feeling overwhelmed and doesn't know how to find community or friends or anything, what would be your first step to, as the therapist, to be like, here's what you should do?
yeah. I mean, making friends as an adult is just hard. It's just
It's
a lot
scary.
more difficult. It's vulnerable. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And what research shows is that friendships tend to form naturally when there are three things present. One of them is proximity, meaning you're just, in the same
Close
place as
by.
other
Right.
people. One of them is repeated unplanned interactions. So that's why school is a great place to make friends because you're showing up and you're seeing them over and over again.
Sure.
The relationship can kind of form over time. And then one of them is a setting that lets you bring your guard down.
Hmm.
So that's why like college dorms are perfect because they are all these three things. You're living in proximity to each other, you see each other over and over again, and you're all in this new phase of life. So you're all kind of vulnerable together. So my suggestion as an adult is recreate these conditions for
Hmm.
yourself in whatever way you can. And so taking a class of something that you find interesting is good because you're going to see those same people every week. You'll start to form friendships over time. And then another trick that I share that a friend of mine taught me years ago is if you want friends who, let's say you really want more friends who love food, or you want more friends who are also working on their emotional fitness, reach out to one or two friends who you know are kind of that way and say, hey, I'm throwing a dinner party and you're invited. And the only thing you have to do is bring someone I don't know who also loves food or who's also working on their emotional fitness.
I
And now
love
all of a
that.
sudden you've doubled your number of guests and you can all sit and get to know each other. And then the next month you can do it again and have those people each bring one person and you can kind of expand your community out from there.
That's funny. I like that food example because for me, the way that I found the community with the moms was I felt so lonely, even though I had like a group of people around me being family and friends and stuff. But I felt lonely because in the
Mm,
experience of being postpartum. And
yeah.
so literally when Lady was 7 weeks old, I had found a music teacher to have at my house. And I invited the neighbor behind me who I was like friends with, but we weren't super close, but we were friends with. And I said, she had just had a baby. I said, do you want to join? And a few other moms that I was close with. And through them, they invited other moms who then joined other moms. Then there was a mom walking on the street who, had the same similar stroller to another mom. And she was like, oh, what do you do with your baby? She's like, we do this music class. You should come. And that is literally how this organic,
Mm,
we're called the music mamas, and it's how we organically created this community was literally by me getting this fabulous teacher to come to our house and change all of our lives and be in that same stage of life. So I think you're right. That's really nice. The being in that same stage of vulnerability in someone's life can really allow you to bond so much with someone else and create that. And we would see them weekly, right? So there you go, of
exactly. Yeah.
seeing them all the time. And most of them lived in the same neighborhood as me, so I would see them on walks too. And yeah, wow, I mean it's pretty neat how community can really change so much for you too.
Yeah, and you made that happen by saying, "All right, I'm going to do something I love and invite other people who might love it too." And, the community starts to form that way. So a lot of it is just, it is vulnerable. There is fear of rejection that we all have. It's not always going to go perfectly, but when we extend ourselves, when we roll the dice, it will often pay off.
Yeah, it does. So to finalize all this, how can we maintain our emotional fitness?
Well, first of all, I just want to say you moved through those seven traits so gracefully. I was like, oh, wow,
Oh,
we've talked about all the traits. That's so lovely. So, to maintain
did
your
we talk
emotional
about fear
fitness,
or did I? Yeah, we talked about fear.
I don't think did we talk about
Did we
fear?
not?
That's not one of the traits though. That's just
That's
a
one of
thing we all feel.
I had fear as one of the things, so I was like, I don't
Yeah, we
think that
did
that's what it was, but
mindfulness,
but yes.
curiosity, self-awareness, resilience, empathy, communication, playfulness. You crushed it. So, to maintain, again, it's a practice. You do not work out for a week and then think that you're going to just be fit. You have to work out every day, at least a little bit. It doesn't always have to be a 5K, it could just be a few push ups or a walk around the block. So, similarly with your emotional fitness, do one thing every day that puts you just a little bit outside of your emotional comfort
Mhm.
zone so that you can grow. Pick one of the traits and lean into it. Play a game at the beginning of a meeting or ask a friend if they'd be willing to practice conflict conversation with you. Or if you are afraid of public speaking, do a talk in front of the mirror. Just little steps toward your discomfort. And over time, you'll get so much stronger and it will get easier and you'll be able to do more and more.
Oh, gosh, I love that so much. This book is so amazing. Everyone, check it out. It's Flex Your Feelings by Dr. Emily Anhalt. It's so great. Just to catch up, how's Koa doing?
Koa's great. We are out there helping people with their emotional fitness. It's classes specifically for people who want to flex into these 7 traits. Go to joinkoa.com if you want to learn about that. We really especially tailor toward companies that want to support their employees with their emotional fitness. So check that out and grab a copy of that book. And I'm also on socials. My handle is at Dr. Emily Anhalt. Reach out to me there and we can flex our feels together.
And I will have all the links below. I'm going to ask you my final question that I ask everyone.
All right.
Emily, what is your emotional support?
Well, my emotional support, I would say more than anything else, is community. There
Mm.
is something so powerful about feeling like there are people who have your back. And it doesn't mean I don't feel lonely. And it doesn't mean that I sometimes feel frustrated with the people I love. But knowing that ultimately they're there is my emotional support.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love you so much. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. This is the new season. I took almost a year hiatus because I was just so overwhelmed
Mm,
and just I couldn't get myself motivated to come back. I don't know why. There were a lot of reasons why, but I not to get into right now. But when you reached out and you said you had this book, I was like, okay, I'm going to read this. This is going to be such a fun read, you know? And I was like, I'm so excited to bring the podcast back because it's people like you that are making such a change into the wellness community. And this book will not just be for someone who has in quote unquote mental health, issues or, diagnosis. Like this is for everyone. And I think that
mm,
that's more what I'm trying to, get across is that mental wellness is for all of us. It's not just
yes.
for a specific little group.
Yes.
And so I thank you so much. Everyone pick up your copy and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. You're such a gem.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to stop